During this video, I'll drink exactly as many beers as there are drow in Passage to Dawn. Let's go. Cheers. Ho, 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 and welcome to the 10th day of Drizztmas, or the end of the Legacy of the Drow subseries. The fourth book in this series in particular, which is called Passage to Dawn, and this is obviously the 10th Drizzt Do'Urden novel, both in publication and chronological order, and it's a slight step up compared to the previous three incredibly terrible novels. Well, technically, the last six novels, seven novels. Gods, it's been a while since I kind of found good things to say about these books. In fact, it was back in Crystal Shard and Streams of Silver. And maybe it's connected to the return of the Crystal Shard, because this is, all about that kind of stuff. So we'll do the usual thing. I'll give you a bit of a, synopsis of the whole plot. And then I'll talk about D&D bits in here, Dungeons and Dragons bits, and then I'll talk about all the other stuff that annoyed me because it's not as horrific as the previous three books, it's still not a good book. Trust me. So, let's get started with the plot. Leaving off after Siege of Darkness, or as I would call it, Le Siège de l'Obscurité, because I don't practice French. My point is, after that, Cadbury and Drizzt Do'Urden went on a long trip to do adventuring stuff. Meanwhile, Brunner Battlehammer said that he would probably take over Mithril Hall, while his great-great-great-great-great-great-granddad, Gandalf, I guess that's his name, would just hang around. And, well, maybe the Barbarians would go back to Icewind Dale. That's sort of where we left things back then. And now, 6 years have passed, and everyone's favorite demon, Ertu, the guy who didn't have, anything important to do in Crystal Shard, he still doesn't have anything important to do. Let's keep it real here, right? But he has had 6 years to torture an unnamed prisoner of Loths. And for the entire book, we're supposed to think it's Zagnafane, because of course, while in truth it's Wulfgar, and it's very clear early on that it is Wulfgar. And Ertu is trying to get back onto the material plane, so he does in fact do something ridiculous, which is send a message to Drizzt Do'Urden and others, so Drizzt can actually summon him back onto the material plane, and then he can do stuff and get the Crystal Shard Crinchinibon and do things. So that's the back plot. So Drizzt hangs out with Cadbury on board the Sea Sprite with Captain Dudamant, fights pirates until they get attacked, or Dudamant gets attacked by a doppelganger, and then they have a mysterious prophecy to go to an island where a blind sea witch is hanging out, and she gives a poem to Drizzt, because everything has to be done in poems, and then he figures out, oh, Ertu has Zagnafane, and obviously he doesn't, and then they do some stuff. They meet Caterly Bonaduce, arguably the best named or second best named character in all of Salvatore's Drizzt novels. The best named is obviously his father, but his name escapes me at the moment because, it's been a while since I read those books. And they, find out stuff. They go back to Icewind Dale, where luckily everyone else has ended up as well, because Brunner has not become king of Mithril Hall again, but gone back to Icewind Dale to mine Icewind Dale for reasons. Regis is with him, and of course all the Barbarians are also back in Icewind Dale, so they can have all their conflicts going up again. Now, at that point, after some weird hijinks that end the Sea Sprite in an inland lake and shit like that, Drizzt and Cadbury also return to Icewind Dale. Everyone waits for, Ertu to show up, do the Crinchinibon thing, and they go to the ice all the way up to the north. And, fight Ertu and free Wulfgar. And that's it. And everyone is like, oh, I thought he was Zagnafane. I'm so surprised that it is Wulfgar. Even though we all knew for, the entirety of the book. Anyway, that's that. And that's the end of the book. The ending is incredibly cheesy and brings us back to something I talked about before, and we'll talk about again when we talk about structure and shit. which is now. Right. See, what I mentioned is that periodically Salvatore needs to return everything to the starting position again, because these are ongoing books again and again and again. So from time to time, he has to get everyone back where they started, which is Icewind Dale. He has to get Wolfgar back, which we finally get after the Legacy of the Drow arc. Now he has to get everyone back to Icewind Dale, which we do, and then we can give them a new adventure to set out upon for the next sub-series. This time around, it's finally getting rid of that pesky crystal shard, which is arguably or maybe what we'll talk about in the next trilogy, but there's other stuff as well. So that's kind of what's going on in this book, which still follows the five-part structure of previous books. And most of the first two parts are just Drizzt and Catti doing pirate stuff, then hanging out with Catterley, so we can all admire Catterley being really cool, because this is slowly morphing into the R.A. Salvatore as expanded universe situation, where he has to introduce the characters from the Cleric Quintet, which I think might just be a better sub-series, Forgotten Realms series, than the Drizzt novel, just because it has a firm ending. It has a lot of problems as well. Don't make me read it again. So we get to meet Catterley. Catterley gets to be incredibly overpowered, like all of these characters get to be. They summon Ertru. They find out stuff. It's mostly just a cameo to probably advertise for the Cleric Quintet, which I guess didn't sell that well. And then, the last part is everyone hanging out in Icewind Dale waiting for Ertu to show up, and then go and fight him. And then, all of that is once again held together by a lot of mostly physical combat, although there's one big mage duel, and then there's a lot of magery stuff happening now, because now we have a good priest who gets to do good magic stuff, like wind walking and stuff like that. So that's basically it for structure. Now let's look first at what I think makes it sort of good, and then let's look at what I think makes it really bad, and let's look at what makes it very Dungeons and Dragons-y. Alright, so the Dungeons and Dragons-y side of things, I think works better here than it did in Siege of Darkness, for a couple of reasons. One, going on adventures on the surface, going sailing, hunting pirates, freeing friends. That stuff makes for a better, adventuring and role-playing game feel than just fighting off a huge-ass siege of Drow. It just focuses more on, the individual characters. Large-scale battles are something for war games, and not necessarily for tabletop role-playing games, which kind of moved away from that. That's kind of why we have role-playing games and are not just still playing, just war games. So it just feels more like a Dungeons and Dragons novel again, just through that. It also has a lot of these features that we've come to recognize from role-playing games. It has prophecies that you need to discover. It has, riddles. It does a lot of summoning of monsters. It does a lot of fighting in that regard. It does all of these things better than the last three books that were too focused on a plot that does not really fit into the Forgotten Realms atmosphere, I guess, or spirit in a lot of ways. So this is good as a starter. What else does it do? It finally gives us mages, a lot of mages. See, Harkle Harple and whatever his name is, I keep forgetting his name, Oberlard, the ship mage of the Sea Sprite, who's now a pirate hunting vessel. You know, they have a mage duel where they kill a bunch of zombies, which are basically just cannon fodder. It doesn't really matter that much, but it allows R.A. Salvatore to name drop a shitload of official spells from different rulebooks all over the place, including Agonazar's Scorcher and Melf's, whatever it's called, the poison arrow thing, that Melf spell, and Bigby's giant hand, and a lot of other stuff. So he just does name drop a lot of official spells, and I assume that was something he had to do. It feels like the DSR guys went like, "Look, Bobby, you're doing your own thing. You've kind of ignored the time of troubles already. Could you please at least advertise a bunch of spells for us? That would be really neat." And it's like, okay, I'll just write you one wizard sequence where they just like fight off, fire off all of their spells and name drop them all, so we can, we have them in there, which is how I see this happening. And this gives me once again that feeling that at this point, Salvatore thinks he's bigger than Jesus. Jesus, in this case, of course, I guess being either the entirety of TSR's editing board or, as we said, Saint Ed of the Greenwood. Um, he just does his own thing there and just does the laziest possible way of including all of these spells. But still, it was fun for me to read because I've played Wizards in different editions of Dungeons and Dragons, both, on the tabletop, and I've played both Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. So it's like seeing those and the Icewind Dale video game. So yeah, it was fun seeing all of the spells that I've used in different situations being brought up. So I'll give him that. That's really cool. So just to be on the fresh air, not have to consider, hang out with Drow again, seeing other places, that's really cool. We get a bunch of demons name dropped. In this case, all the guys from the Abyss. There's the Glabrezu, which we've seen before. There's the Baelor, which is Urtu. There's a Succubus, which has a different name, which I have forgotten because who cares? They're just a bunch of monsters from the Abyss. So we get them introduced in large detail in the final battle when we have the mains and all kinds of other demons just showing up so he can drop in a bunch of demons. It does the job. It does not necessarily help with the feeling of an actual tabletop game because once again that final battle is just so overpowered because his characters are so overpowered at this point. It doesn't replicate the feeling of a gaming table, but it does showcase a lot of the monsters that, Dungeons and Dragons has. So well done there. It definitely feels more like a tie-in novel than the previous one, two, possibly three. Well, the previous three of this sub-series did. So well done on that account. Let's look at what I enjoyed about it, and then let's look at why I think it still sucks. And let's start with that feeling. See, the opening chapters of this book, with Drizzt and Canterbury fighting pirates on the wide seas, that's really cool. Now I was like, wow, we're actually in the open air again. We're not fighting Drow. Seriously, the fact that there's only Drizzt Do'Urden in this book and no one from Menzo fucking Berenzan anymore feels so refreshing because Drow don't make for good adversaries. They just don't. Jalaxley is cool, but that's because he's Jalaxley. Everyone else sucks. And so having no Drow is really good. Having that opening sequence, the battle, even the annoying Harkle Harple showing up with the usual "oh, wizards are so ridiculous" kind of thing. Yeah, I guess it works in that regard. It was just well done. Um, the ending did not work. Something that I found out throughout the thing, where I feel like, oh, Salvatore has gotten so fucking lazy, right? So there's one plot device happening in this book, which is Salvatore just explicitly doing Game Master Fiat, or, well, I can't call it Deus Ex Machina because it's not technically the same thing. But Hercule Harple has a spell, and it's called the Fog of Fate, which just puts the character and everyone around them where they're supposed to be. Yeah, it's that literal. It's literal. It's that literal. Our Gru just like plot hops to a different place to meet Cataly because Harkle Harple casts a spell that says like, "Let's go where we need to be." It's it's almost insulting how on the nose it is. Like I'm torn between respecting Salvatore for so openly not giving a shit and going like, well, someone let you get away with this? I feel insulted and have a certain amount of respect for that level of laziness. Beyond it, yeah, as I said, it's lazy. Obviously we need some way to get our characters quickly somewhere else, so we're doing that, and it's unnecessary. Like you could have cut out the entire thing with Cataly, of course. Just like had the heroes come back, or heroes like characters move back to Waterdeep. Talk to a wizard there, summon Urtu, or summon a demon, find out what's going on, go to Icewind Dale. It would have totally worked, but Salvatore needs to put in um, the Catterley bit, possibly once again because the Cleric Quintet didn't sell that well, and maybe he was asked by TSR to put it in. I don't know because obviously I've not asked the man, and I doubt he'll talk to me. But it feels very forced. Either he's too, too proud to not put it in, too egotistical to not put Catterley and Pickle and Ivan, the boulder shouldered dwarves, which are obviously, like, objectively the worst Forgotten Realms dwarfs ever because the humor just does not work. And Danica, we get a bit of, the Danica mirroring, what's her name, Cadibri situation, where we have the scene. For the first time, two human women have actually talked to each other in a Drizzt novel. And you know what they talk about? They talk about men. So yes, Drow matrons have, on occasion talked about killing other Drow matriarchs. So I guess maybe this passes the Bechtel test, but I'm not quite sure because sure as hell in book 10, two women actually in the same room and they start talking about men. Yeah, what do you expect? My point is, the whole episode seems unnecessary and prolongs this novel, which is one of the longest so far. And it does not help with the structure, and it just feels self-indulgent in a lot of ways. So I found that part annoying because, yeah, I've read the Cleric Quintet before, so I recognize what he's doing. Everyone else would just go like, okay, so we have this uber cleric here, I guess. Who cares? Yeah, it's self-indulgent and unnecessary unless you a need to actually sell these books, or b need to just prop up your own ego, I guess. So that part's bad, and after that, yeah, the structure kind of falls apart because there's so many inconsistencies. Once again, right? We have the whole at the end of what's it called, Siege of Darkness, Brunner, like Caddy and Wolfgar talking about Brunner becoming king of Mithril Hall. Then now he's just like decided to go back to Icewind Dale for, this is home, I guess. We have inconsistencies in the way that, like, Stumpert, the hilariously named Stumpert Rakenclaw, who's maybe hooking up with Brunner, which will definitely not happen, for now at least. And we have all of that stuff, and she then gets possessed, and she walks away. And everyone's like, just assumes that it's Ertu doing that. She doesn't tell that. She could have just as well done anything else, but everyone's like, okay, I guess Ertu's here, and we know now, so we follow her. There's a significant bit of information missing that our characters just assume, and we the readers know because we've seen what Erto is doing because he told us all of that in an aside chapter. So we know, but the characters don't know. And it's once again that problem when you rely so heavily on tell instead of show, that it creates inconsistencies, and it does so here. And that brings us, to the two main problems here. One of them is, of course, the Barbarians, because they're always a problem. The other one is the idea of, the twist. Let's start with the twist, and then we'll talk about the Barbarians before this all ends. See, the twist is, of course, that it's Wolfgar and it's not Zagnafane. And we could have known from the start, because obviously Zagnafane got dropped into a pool of acid, which should probably finish him completely, whereas Wolfgar hung out or got dragged away by a Yochlol, which I don't know if Salvatore came up with those himself or if they were already in a monster handbook at the time, because he brings them up way too many times. He's way too fond of describing Yochlol. Anyway, Wolfgar gets dragged off with her, so we kind of knew from the start. And this book starts with a seduction scene, with a succubus and a seduction scene, as Wolfgar gets seduced by the demon. And that only makes sense if it's Wolfgar the character, because Zagnafane never was into that kind of stuff. We also, Zagnafane loved killing women, because he's that kind of guy, for all kinds of reasons, right? So it kind of feels cheap when it's finally revealed that, oh, yes, it is Wolfgar. I at least he doesn't over explain it as he did, as Salvatore did back with the Halfling's Gem, but it's still so clumsy that it's just annoying. It also is interesting because it sets up the next arc, and we'll talk about that obviously tomorrow or well later. um, that bringing back Wolfgar after basically taking him off the board so Drizzt can leer at sweaty Cadibree's undershirt or whatever. We're now bringing him back for maybe that love triangle thing, but we'll see if that works in the future. So I think the twist just falls flat because it's too obvious a twist. But maybe it's because I'm reading them, I'm rereading them. I read it before, I knew where it was going. Maybe I was overly critical here. I don't know. If you've read them once, you can tell me in the comments whether you saw when it was that you saw the twist coming and realized that it was Wolfgar. I'd be interested in that. And now let's talk about the barbarian thing because I think it's at the end of the day the most annoying thing beyond just the usual bullshit. And let's look at that. So the barbarians have returned from Settlestone to become full on barbarians again and find their home and their soul, which apparently is being raiders on the tundra and being nomads and living in towns is not. Now, there's an interesting debate to be had if we assume or look back at the fact that these barbarians are heavily Native American coded. In a lot of ways. Yes, they are all blonde and look like fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger in a lot of ways. They're like this weird idea of combining Fafert, Conan, and then still making them, I don't know, reindeer hunting, caribou hunting nomads. The problem is, there's an interesting discussion to be had about, having a heritage, having a historical background, having history, being forced to live a sedentary lifestyle instead of a nomadic lifestyle, being forced into civilization. We kind of have that with Wolfgar, who gets dragged into into Bruner's residential school for non-dwarfs, where they learn dwarven ways. We have that here. You could have an interesting argument about them returning, trying to find a way of, of living, building their own tradition themselves, their identity. We could have that conversation. The problem is, it doesn't work like that because Berthka the Bold, who is obviously Wolfgar's follower and the leader after Wolfgar is dead, he's consistently portrayed as an angry idiot in a lot of ways. And yes, we get told that he's not that stupid, so he actually considers what Canterbury tells him and so forth. But he still thinks that the goal for barbarians is to go back to, attacking civilization and being raiders and murderers. Now, if this is about spirituality, which supposedly it is, you need to show that spirituality and not make it about being angry and attacking people, unless you want to make up a whole, open up that whole conversation about colonizers and so forth. And Salvatore is not doing that. Of course he's not, because this is the Forgotten Realms. They're not supposed to be political. Then you can't do that here. You can do that in the Malazan Book of the Fall, but you can't do it here. So he can't do that, but he still ends up with a very specific, very negative depiction of the barbarians. Which leads to that idea that, yeah, I guess we can't teach those people civilization. They have to be, the murderous outlaws up here that kill everyone because that's in their nature. And that's a very bad way of doing this. I mean, obviously, I'm not giving him that much benefit of the doubt here. I'm not doing a very charitable reading, but the point is that it is built into this story, the way it is told. There is a lot of potential for, a nuanced discussion, but neither, role-playing game tables allow for that kind of nuance in a discussion, nor does role-playing game tie-in fiction. Fantasy itself could allow for that, but not in a 300-page novel. Unless maybe a Terry Pratchett could have pulled this off. But we're talking about a R.A. Salvatore. He still needs to figure out a lot of ideas like basic language in a lot of ways. He's not up to that task, so we end up with just a lot of stereotypes and cliches being repackaged in a lot of ways. Once again, probably subconsciously, but it's important to understand that there is a situation in which this kind of subconscious ideas could flourish and then still be popular with enough people to end up in, a printed book. And I think that's kind of what we see here with the Barbarian plotline. It just feels off to me, is my point. I can't go, I don't want to go deeper into this because it's, I'm, I have no background knowledge or anything in these themes of, native spirituality, native identity, or the struggle for native identity and so forth. I don't have that, so it's not my place to tell anything of that sort. I'm just sitting here like, well, this feels wrong and off. And with that, let's look at like one or two really stupid things that just really annoyed me. One of them is he comes back with the Crystal Tirith thing. He once again claims, Salvatore claims that Crystal Tirith means Crystal Tower in Elvish. He explicitly says that now. First time around here in Crystal Shard, he just called it Crystal Tirith. Like, maybe it's just, a general, specific name for this. I can live with that. And I know it's Elvish for Crystal Tower. No, Bob Salvatore. Tirith means guard. It does not mean tower. And Krishel, I'm pretty sure you made up. So there's that. It's just a minor annoyance. It just shows how incredibly cheap these books are in a lot of ways. Then there's the sea sprite being becalmed on the ocean. It's completely calm, and everyone on board are experienced sailors, and still seasickness is apparently a threat in that specific situation. Now, I'm not that kind of, I've not spent that much time on sea, but I'm pretty sure that's not how seasickness works. There's another point that's just lazy writing where at the beginning Dudermont encounters the doppelganger being disguised as a homeless person, although he insists in calling him a salty sea dog who still lives in an alleyway apparently. And throughout that entire conversation, like it's the first half of the first chapter, second chapter, I think. He used the term salty sea dog like 10 times. Apparently, Salvatore thinks that salty sea dog means former sailor, now homeless person. It's just like bad in that regard. And then we come up to like the laziest part. Remember Pinochet, the the pirate from the Halfling's Gem? See, this book starts with a combat with Pinochet's adjutant, one of his lieutenants. Now, what do you think that guy under Pinochet is called? Well, luckily, it's not Salvador Allende. I'm really happy that he didn't go down that road. No, he calls him Caracas. Like, get your geography right, motherfucker. you could have called him Santiago. At this point, who really fucking cares, man? It's so cheap, and I think that's what I've learned from this book in particular. It did not annoy me as much or hurt as much. It wasn't as boring, as meaningless as the last three books, mostly because it's more adventurous. The characters are moving about. They're encountering all kinds of different people doing stuff and whatnot. It's just more spread out, not just like one continuous fight scene throughout the entire motherfucking thing. But at the end, on the other hand, it's the laziest book in a long while. It's like, at this point, he seems to just not care. There's so many things in here, and they're like, you could have, done something clever here, but instead, you give us the terrible cameo of Catterley. You put all the magic stuff into one magic duel so you can name drop all the spells in one go. You use the fog of fate to just push your characters to the next place. It's like, and you can't even get the fucking capital of Chile right, motherfucker. That's bad. That's just really, really bad. And the question is, was Salvatore tired of the Legacy of the Drow series when he reached this book and he just wanted to get it over with? And will things improve now that Wolfgar's back? And everyone starts basically where they started, well, I guess, where they started Streams of Silver. Will they? Or will we encounter a very skillful argument and discussion of PTSD and other things that people might suffer throughout their lives? I'll let you guess. until I upload the video for the Silent Blade. Until then, thanks for watching, and cheers.